My name is Rita McNanny. I'm the Parking Services Manager for the City of Summit. Good evening, members of Common Council. This evening's presentation is about two major developments on the forefront of the parking and transportation industry that was presented at the International Parking Institute's annual conference that I attended this year. The first is autonomous vehicles, and the second is transforming mobility. Sorry, I think they showed this. So again, a lot of discussions on autonomous vehicles. There's predictions that will be in the Jetson life very soon. So, what are autonomous vehicles? There are actually 5 different levels. So if you give me a moment, I'd like to briefly explain what the 5 different levels are. The first 3 levels, the driver must be alert at all times. Level 1 has automated system features such as cruise control, backup camera, lane detection systems, which are most new vehicles today. Level 2 has level 1 features, plus automated accelerating, braking, and steering. The driver must remain alert if the automated system fails. Level 3 includes level 1 and level 2. However, the automated system recognizes its performance limitation, and the driver must remain in control of the vehicle within a sufficient time frame. Level 4 is where the automated system is in control, except in certain events such as hazardous weather conditions, severe weather, rain, snow, ice. Level 5 is where there is no driver intervention required. Just simply set the destination and start the system, and it's fully autonomous. Developers of autonomous vehicles predict that by the year 2070, 95% of traffic will be autonomous vehicles. But there are many barriers with autonomous vehicles. There are grave safety concerns. There have been many accidents with testing AV vehicles, including one pedestrian fatality. The technology is quite expensive. Plus, it has connectivity and reliability issues. There are many questions surrounding government regulations. There are legal issues. The costs are not affordable for most. The level 3 and 5 autonomous vehicles range from $150,000 to $250,000 per vehicle. There's a lack of consumer trust currently as well. This chart depicts why autonomous vehicles fail. Almost 35% is with perception discrepancies, such as a vehicle sensing overhanging branches as an obstacle. 34% includes inherent software and hardware issues. The balance is due to unwanted maneuvers by autonomous vehicles, weather conditions, emergency vehicles, pedestrian habits, and construction zones. As mentioned, there's barriers such as snow as ice, heavy fog, and many road detours, which make autonomous vehicles difficult for adaptation here on the East Coast. Let's take a look at the government and legal barriers. Who is at fault for an AV accident? Who will own the insurance? Will AVs be programmed to always follow the law? How will AVs be programmed to respond in emergency? What will the role of federal, state, and local governments be? Then consumers weighed in. Reuters conducted a poll in January of 2018. Out of the close to 2,600 participants, 2/3 are uncomfortable with the idea of riding in a self-driving car. The respondents included both males and females and different age brackets. Interestingly, 55% of millennials are uncomfortable with autonomous vehicles. Another consumer poll taken in 2015 where the majority of respondents would never buy or lease a self-driving vehicle. The presenter of this information at the IPI conference is a leader in the parking industry, Carl Walker Parking Consultants. Their position is autonomous vehicles will be developed, but the driverless vehicle that is not personally owned, that is being predicted by some to decimate the parking industry, is decades away. The current reality is, despite Uber and Lyft and extensive promotion of AV vehicles and public transit, there is still much demand for new parking structures. So how does autonomous vehicles affect Summit's parking? Currently, there are too many barriers. There's government regulations. There's too many unanswered questions. AVs are too expensive and currently unpredictable. A new parking structure would last 50 to 100 years if properly maintained. New garage design considerations include future building adaptations, meaning in the future you would take some of the garage levels and maybe convert it to office space. These come at a very high cost. Summit currently needs 350 to 400 new parking spaces. Even with Summit's successful rideshare program, parking is still needed. Current redevelopment discussions should include additional parking. The bottom line is autonomous vehicles replacing the need for structured parking is extremely far off. I just wanted to also show you what a new concept out there is for garage planning to transform parts of a garage into office space if the use of mainly AV vehicles becomes a reality. There are inherent additional high costs and design inefficiencies of a garage of this type. There's lost parking for interior stairs and elevators which are required to transform from a garage to office space. As we know, a garage, stair, and elevators are in your corners, so you maximize the number of spaces. Concrete floors must be designed for higher loads for non-parking usage. Added expansion joints and double rows of columns are needed as well. Express ramps are needed for any conversion. So while AV developers predict that in 50 years from now, 95% of the traffic will be autonomous vehicles, the likelihood is very doubtful. Therefore, we must plan for additional parking needs today because we will still have non-autonomous vehicles 50 years from now. The next section I'd like to talk about is transforming mobility. Software companies within the transportation and parking industry are working with vehicle manufacturers to bring parking availability into vehicles. Currently, many navigational systems within vehicles will inform the driver of parking locations, however, not parking availability. So the driver will drive there and the location is full. This particular software could guide residents and visitors to available parking through the vehicle's navigation system as opposed to a driver while driving looking down at an app. With this software, we can utilize our current count systems in the DeForest lots that will actually bring in real-time parking availability to drivers through their navigational systems. This particular software integrates with Park Mobile and Amana McGann, which we currently use. With adding lot counters to Broad Street Garage and the Tier Garage by the end of this year, we can also guide residents and downtown employees to parking availability in these locations as well. There are future capabilities of this software down the road for parking availability on street. That's still being developed by the software company. It could also show you where your parking restrictions are, your loading zones, where your rideshare drop-off and pickup locations are, and EV charging stations. So therefore, while they're driving, they would have this information while they're driving and not looking at an app. So Summit is currently looking and speaking to them. We had a meeting with the technology committee last evening with the vendor to try a pilot, utilizing the DeForest lots information and then bring on the additional garages. Um, So again, these are the two main information that we saw at the IPI conference, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more in the coming months and in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Why don't we open up for questions? Marjorie?
Thank you for your presentation, Rita. I was just wondering, you mentioned using navigation systems for the mobility, and I'm just wondering, now that people are getting, Waze and all of those kinds of apps, how many people actually are still purchasing cars with navigation systems? And if we're seeing a decrease in that, is there a way to use it with apps? A lot of us put the apps on a handle on our dashboard. So it really is no different than a navigation system in the sense of driver distraction.
Well, I think with Waze, because we looked at that last evening, the app itself is a little slow for the on-street or off-street application side of it. Many people use Waze or Google, and you can have your phone and it'll tell you, turn right here, turn right there. They really don't have to look at it. But it's a very slow-moving app for parking availability. But a lot of the manufacturers are working with parking and transportation planners to include it in the navigation system. A lot of more vehicles are coming with navigation systems. You can pay extra for certain applications, but this is where it'll come in, like BMW will come in with Waze and come in with this particular software at no additional cost.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Steve?
Yeah, you were talking about the robust services. Is there any way that, I don't hear anything on the license plate recognition. Is there anything that we can utilize that in controlling the numbers or something? I guess we've invested a fair amount in there.
I mean, it's something that I can definitely ask them to see if they can take the ALPR information of vehicles there and then populate that into their software. It's definitely a question I can ask them. We were strictly trying to start with the off-street because we already have lock counters. But as an example, we discussed Union Place for parking on-street availability. There's so much turnover on Union Place, by the time it even uploaded, those spaces would have turned over or they're now full again. So again, I don't want to give a perception, especially for on-street parking availability, that a person goes there and then all of a sudden it's full. But it's still a question I'd be more than happy to ask.
Rita, you had said that you're trying a pilot. Can you describe what exactly are you trying in the pilot?
Okay, so and again, it will be brought back to council. We're waiting to see how it would integrate. Currently now we have lock counters in the DeForest lots. So every time a vehicle enters or exit, and then we have a lot full sign. But what happens currently is people drive there, the lot full sign, they go to the next lot, they go to the next lot. This would hopefully prevent that. So the data that we currently have would be brought into this app, and then the person driving there will say, okay, there's 25% availability in lot 1, lot 2 is full, lot 3, so they don't have to physically, they can go to lot 1 instead of going to lot 3. So again, it's all about eliminating congestion. It's those constant trips of people driving around looking for parking spaces. That's the goal of the pilot.
What is the app? Is it through Park Mobile or is it through some other?
No, it's through INRIX, INRIX. And like I said, again, nothing's been decided. It's just, that's why I brought the technology committee on board first, to have an immediate discussion with them to get their feedback. So again, when we gather more information, I may be able to answer some of those questions for you.
Great, thank you. Beth?
In terms of the autonomous vehicles, I know you attended a lot of sessions about that. Were there any recommendations that came out of those as far as for municipalities planning for the future, looking at the redevelopment or any of those things that there's some factors that municipalities should be keeping in mind in terms of long-term planning and
Sure. There's two things. One, which Summit's already working on, or is involved in, is the rideshare component. Some of these autonomous vehicles, once they are deemed safe, there are companies out there where the city could then purchase 5 of them and have them parked in an off-site location, and then someone could then, from their phone, dispatch a vehicle, and that vehicle will come pick them up and drop them off and then go back. One of the things with autonomous vehicles, you have to realize you still need curb space, and then you need a place to store them. There's maintenance cost. I didn't want to get too involved in that, but there are programs that are coming out, but right now, Again, there's a lot of more testing that needs to go on with these autonomous vehicles. Because again, whether it's Zipcar or some of the other program vehicles, that's the thing, it's the testing. But it is something for the future that we could try that might alleviate congestion. One of the things with the consumers that they also brought up is people like the convenience of having their own vehicle. They may not purchase two vehicles, especially with the rideshare capabilities of today. However, especially they can't bring their pet in an autonomous vehicle. There's certain restrictions. They're not going to take an autonomous vehicle on vacation. So I think from a family perspective, there might lower the purchasing of more than one vehicle, but we're still going to have personal vehicles on the road for people's convenience.
Mike?
No, I thought it's great to, Rita, to start thinking about. I think that app where you can find parking and stuff is a great thought around better utilizing our existing assets. So I think that's really, really important, because right now we have a fixed amount of them, and it's trying to squeeze more vehicles in. So I think that's great. But I would kind of concur with Councilwoman Fox. Anything that's not going to be going through this is today's technology. I would just caution about wedding to a technology that's not mobile, that's not using the phone. I mean, that's just the way things are, and I think trying to force kind of against that tide is going to be very, very difficult, I think. But I could be wrong. I'm not a technologist. So I'm not sure, do they have plans for that? Because I'm the same way. I have a navigation system in a car. I haven't turned it on in 3 years.
Okay.
I use my phone. It's just easier and it's better. And I think that's kind of the way it needs to be.
Right. I think one of the things we're hearing from the parking industry too, and that's why they're pushing more towards the navigational system to make it, number one, less expensive, easier, is because while, even though you may have that phone right there, they're really trying not to be using their phones while driving. So again, I understand what you're saying. Most people may not want to use it or pay for a navigational system. I think through time, those costs will come down on the navigational systems. But I think the hands-free driving or not looking at a cell phone is a greater concern for the entire parking transportation industry. But again, I understand what you mean. I wouldn't want to get locked in. It's a pilot to see if it works. And, it's being vetted by the technology committee. And there's many questions that we're going to go back to them and ask.
Right, well,
So that's a good one.
No, look, I have a lot of questions about how people use phones, particularly my kids, but it's not going to change because I wish it to change. It is what it is. Yeah. I guess the other thing which I'm just curious, when you read a lot of stuff about the future of autonomous vehicles, I mean, to me, this seems like a pretty pessimistic view around that industry. That's going to take 50 years to be completely adopted. I mean, I think part of this might be that you got to look at who's presenting to which audience.
Right.
I think if you went to a technology conference that was just talking about to angel investors, they'd be telling you that autonomous vehicles are going to be here in 5 years.
Right around the corner.
Exactly. So I think we have to be a little more open-minded to the potential for the technology. I completely agree with you. He cited a lot of hurdles, which particularly safety. For some reason, they seem to hold autonomous vehicles to a much higher standard than human drivers. But that's kind of the way it is for now. But I think it would behoove us to make sure we're fairly open-minded about the prospects of a disruptive technology.
And I think that also the reason for this different way to look at it is because there are a lot of people in communities like ourselves that need parking. So again, it's a mix, and it's something to continue to watch. However, whether the predictions that it's going to replace all personal vehicles, that's concerning. So we'll continue to monitor it.
Excuse me. Rita, thank you for your presentation. This doesn't have to do with that, but it has to do with Park Mobile, which we already do use. And an interesting thing I got today, which is, I don't know whether we want to think about it for Summit or it's even a possibility, but I got a message that I could reserve through Park Mogul my spot for the Yankee game if I wanted to. First of all, I wasn't even thinking of going to the Yankee game.
Are you going to take
But
me?
the fact that I now can reserve a spot if I wanted to makes me think, well, maybe I want to go to the Yankee game. But that being said, what I'm asking really is that something, because that might be something very desirable, knowing, yeah, I could reserve a spot down in the DeForest lot, and I don't have to drive around, I don't have to worry, and I can go and reserve my spot. Something we could be looking into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's through Park Mobile.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Because if you don't know that, and I'm late to the game, I know, with Park Mobile, but I really like it. And the opportunities that it offers, I think
I think
Are
once
great.
we get into where we have some extra parking, everything is first come, first served now, but, for the future, it would be great if we could have reserved parking
Right.
and through an app.
But roll it out, maybe a certain lot we could do that. Anyway,
Maybe some of the commuter lots even.
all right.
Everything's full.
Yeah.
This morning at 10
I
o'clock,
mean,
everything
I
was
think
full.
maybe
Trust
there's
me.
a possibility of reserving, it and rolling out some possibilities of reserving some spots and having.
Currently, until we get more additional parking, I wouldn't recommend that because, like I said, 10 o'clock this morning, everything was full, and I had residents and downtown employees asking me, where can I park? To where I had to put them in shopper parking lots.
Can I ask you, how are we doing with Lyft? We expanded the Lyft program to have employees be able to use it. Are they actually doing it?
There's a very small window, about 3 or 4 people that are using it.
It's really small.
Yes. However, Summit residents are signing up every single day, and we now have a waiting list. We are at the 250 mark, and we still have a waiting list.
Okay.
So what I can do, I can send out a mini report to all of council, tomorrow on what the numbers are, if
Right.
Michael is inclined. Because we did get all those, we have up until the end of August. I'm waiting for September numbers, but I can give you a full view of what's going on with the rideshare program.
Well, that's really great that so does that mean that if the residents are up to 250, does that mean really even if employees wanted to join, they really can't because we're kind of a max capacity? Or is that we allocated 250 for residents and yet there's still some X number still left for
Well, what we did is we looked at anyone who hasn't taken a ride in 90 days. We contacted those people. I think there was about 15, 20 of them. And if they weren't using the program, we asked them to kindly free up those spots for any additional person on the waiting list, whether it's a resident or employee. So we keep having Lyft give us that information monthly, so we can, someone's not on the waiting list too long, and then they lose their interest. So we are on top of that.
Yeah, let me just one, I think I'll agree with what Marjorie, Mike, with all of us, I think, are saying. I think one of the things that is people all use here, and I think people also use the technology that they're already familiar with. I mean, I use Google Maps, I use Park Mobile, I use the stuff that's already there. I'm not quite sure people will think of adding something new and different that's for a unique feature. So I think if we think about even working with software, we should be thinking about how this all integrates to the existing structures that people are using commonly, because that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck.
Certainly.
Okay. With that, I'll just, Beth, you have, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I didn't, that was just a side comment, not my actual comment, but I wanted to, first I want to thank you because this is a really important issue, and not just for our parking lots, but in thinking globally about our zoning and our planning, our master plan. This is a big issue, and the parking universe is really changing, and driving habits are changing, and those are things we need to take in consideration, not just in this perennial issue of parking and do we build a garage or do we not, but looking at the redevelopment, looking at our zoning, looking at the master plan overall, how should we be positioning the city to look at this? So thank you for keeping us abreast and keeping on top of this issue. And I also wanted to make the point that, the cars are changing as well, and not only autonomously, but the new cars are all integrating CarPlay, and it's kind of integrated, but it's kind of doing what you said, and what you said, the navigation systems and the phones are kind of becoming one. Your phone and is kind of plugging into your car and going onto, like integrating with your car and communicating with your car. And I think that's going to be the wave of the future as well, and that seems to be happening with all the new models. And I read an article about that, that instead of having these, you know, navigation systems that are unique to each model, that they're kind of integrating with the phone systems and kind of making it all seamless.
Yes, and we discussed
So I
that
think we
at
need
the
to look at
technology
that as
committee last
well,
night.
and that technology that's
Yep.
going to be coming forward. But it's really important that we keep on top of this and that we keep thinking in this forward way about what's not only what's in front of us today, but what's going to be in front of us tomorrow and next week, next year, and in the future. So I really appreciate you
Oh.
spending the time and putting together the presentation for us.
And also on that, while there may not be a lot of autonomous vehicles, there will be a lot more electric vehicles. So coming soon, we'll have discussions about EV charging stations here in Summit. So again, that's one of the things that they are seeing, that they are manufacturing a lot more electric vehicles. So,
That's great.
we definitely want to get on the map for that here in Summit.
Let's just see if there's any comments or questions from members of the public. Anyone? Great. With that, thank you, Rita.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for a very
And
interesting
George-
presentation.
George is driving the car.
Okay.